Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm joined with Sanjeev Sanyal, Principal Economic Advisor. Sanjeev, thank you so much for speaking to ThePrint. We are on Skype. You are in your offices in the Finance Ministry. I'm here in my office in ThePrint on Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg in Delhi. And this is because of the lockdown. But India has been in lockdown for the last 5 weeks. How do we emerge from it?
So we have taken right from the beginning the same approach, which is that try and cushion for the very worst, and then using a feedback loop, gather information and respond to it along the way. So what we did was obviously at a situation where, we were seeing what was happening in the rest of the world. The Prime Minister took the decision, let's do a national lockdown while we ramp up testing, get a sense of how things are across the country, particularly where the hotspots are. And of course, spread the viral from going viral. So in that sense, what we were doing then was to get a sense of how things were going and breaking the spiraling out situation. Now, as things have turned out, we have been successful as a country in doing that. And I have to say, central government, state government, local governments have worked very hard to ensure that 1.3 billion people went through what is obviously a very complicated thing. Shutting down such a large country and so many people is no easy task.
But do you think the centre and the states have worked together, even the non-BJP states, and you're happy with that?
I can't answer about specifically on political differentiation. I would say that across the country, all states have by and large worked very well. And incidentally, this is not just about state governments, local governments. In the end, these things are enforced absolutely at the bottom level government. So right. I would say we have a fabulous job, whatever may be the occasional wrinkles in the system. This is not an easy thing to have pulled off. And I can say that most people that I speak around the world, foreign investors, companies and so on, they're astounded that we have the administrative and social capacity to be able to deal with something like this, because belatedly many of them are beginning to do what we did in the beginning. Like Singapore, for example, is now in full, and many other countries as well. So they have been quite astounded how well we have pulled it off. Now the question now is, how do we unwind it?
Right.
Which is the real question you asked. Again, the key has been to try and do it step by step using a feedback loop about information. So starting the 20th of May, you saw some easing up. We are doing that as we speak. There are some new notifications on allowing migrants, tourists, etc. to begin to move again. And now we will again take an assessment on the 3rd. The Prime Minister has obviously spoken to the Chief Ministers, who I'm sure are speaking on to the local governments everywhere. And then we will, in a differentiated way, begin to unlock this lockdown. Now, that is the only real way we can do it.
Right.
A sensible way to do it. And also by sectors. And I mean, obviously, we do not want right up front to be reopening international travel, for example. I don't think the rest of the world is yet under control. And even within India, obviously, we have to remain vigilant. So this is not obvious that we are all going in the same direction. We may discover a new hotspot, for example, and then we shall take action accordingly. So this is something where we are unwinding this, but it will be done in a calibrated, step-by-step, feedback loop-based way.
So you don't want to end the infection before you open up. You want to...
Obviously, we now have a much better sense of where the hotspots are. So consequently, I think it is quite obvious that we will have a differentiated approach. I don't think I'm letting you into a state secret that is quite obvious from the way we are proceeding with color coding and so on. So,
yes. So does this mean that India needs to get back to work sooner than later?
Of course. I mean, there is an economic price that is paid by doing a lockdown of this kind. The Prime Minister, the approach the Prime Minister had put forward was that we will first look at the health aspect Therefore, many other countries, for example, may have opted simultaneously to deal with the health and the economic crisis. We prioritized the health issue first.
Right.
Now, this does not mean that the lockdown didn't come with a price, and we are very well aware that it did. Now comes the issue of doing the unwind of this.
So what's the price we are paying? What is the price India would pay?
Sorry?
What's the price India would have paid for these 5 weeks of lockdown?
So obviously, I mean, there are issues, particularly with SMEs. There are sectors like hospitality and so on, which will be obviously affected. Putting a number to it, very difficult to do. But it is. I mean, by the way, we are hardly alone in the world. This will be a very significant impact on countries around the world.
Right.
And, you know, the IMF, various banks, etc., keep coming up with forecasts. But, you know, I don't think that is what we should be focusing on, because these numbers will evolve. We will see how it works out. I think our focus right now has to be going from the initial phase of cushioning the impact of the lockdown. So first phase was, look, we did the lockdown. Clearly, there are issues with poor people may not physically getting food. So we have to get food to them. We have to put some cash in their bank so that they have some cash. Then we have to make sure that the financial system has some liquidity. The financial, it was year end, remember that, financial year end. So push back all the financial, deadlines back, and buy yourself some time while you assess the situation. So that was the cushioning phase. And of course, RBI repeatedly came up with packages, liquidity, and so on. Now we are going to go into the unwinding the lockdown phase. So we're going from the cushioning phase to the opening up phase. So here, again, step by step, keeping in mind the health constraints, we will begin to open things up. And then at some point in the future, we will also we will have to go into the rebuilding phase. So we are not yet there, but certainly what we have done, again, very different from what other countries did. Countries may have right up front come up with $1 trillion package. We obviously did not do that. That's not because we do not appreciate the seriousness of the issue, or that we do not, intend to respond in scale to this. But what we decided to do is we will do it step by step. Again, the same feedback loop based. And as we ramp down the health lockdown, we will ramp up the economic response. But it will be done in a step-by-step way, calibrated way, rather than this grand package. It may work for their economies. I don't want to comment on other countries' responses, but this is our response. And so you have seen the Reserve Bank, for example, do a series of measures. You've seen from the Finance Ministry. We will do more. And by the way, unlike what many people may think, we actually have more resources to respond to this than people realize. I mean, we are one of the very few countries in the world we actually have monetary space. We are living in a world where, most other countries are already at negative interest rates.
You do have the monetary space to be able to give various stimuluses to various sections of the industry.
Yes, so we also have fiscal spaces as well. Sure, we don't intend to open up the gates and sort of spend blindly, but the fact is our debt to GDP ratio is much, much below that of most of the countries that are doing these huge stimulus packages. And by the way, we have other spaces as well. I mean, there are structural reforms we can do, and so on and so forth. Now, obviously, I can't mention specifically what we will do. That's the prerogative of the finance minister.
Right.
But what I'm trying to get through to the audience is that we recognize that we intend to, we have the resources and the intention of trying to do something significant to get us out of this, and that we will do it in a particular step-by-step, ramping up kind of way, rather than this grand package in the beginning kind of way.
So I have a question to that, which is that would you like to put a figure on the growth? Because a lot of people are saying that it could be 0%, it could be 1 or 2%. Some are even talking in terms of there being minus growth. So that's one key concern.
So obviously the impact is significant. I mean, when you close down a sizable part of the economy for several weeks, there has to be an impact. How big is that impact is very difficult to judge. It is also important to remember we don't know exactly how long this will last. Yes, we are unwinding now, but the fact of the matter is this a short tail or is this a long tail? What is happening in the rest? It depends heavily on what happens in the rest of the world as well. Remember, I mean, you can be all up and ready, but there's nowhere to export to. And there are some positive impacts as well. I mean, sharp declines in commodity prices, particularly of energy, benefits us. So it's not all doom and gloom. And of course, looking a little longer, there are also opportunities in this new world that will be there. I mean, clearly, there's a lot of talk about how global supply chains may rejig themselves significantly after this. And India can benefit from such a change. But again, as I said, we do know the impacts are significant, but I would say that I'll leave it to other or professional forecasters to try and gauge this. My job is to make sure that we do this systematically and do it as well as we can at this point.
So as a lot of countries draw down from investing in China, do you think India could take advantage of that and attract some of that investment, for example, say from Japan or from other countries, the US?
So obviously there is a lot of discussion about changes in global supply chains as a result of this. And may not just be related to, some geopolitical developments vis-a-vis China and those countries.
Right.
Simply risk diversification has become a major issue now. So this is something we need to take into account. But let me put a word of caution here as well. While there is obviously opportunities in this new world, we should not blindly think about it that we are going to reflate back into the pre-COVID world. There will be many things that will change in the dynamics of this new world will be different. So yes, the supply chains will change, but it may change in many different ways. It's just not, don't think of it as a reflating with India being the new China. That it's not obvious that it may be that, the way supply chains may work may be different. Many countries may be repatriating capacities in some cases. You also have new technologies. Consumer behavior may have fundamentally been thrown off and onto a different track by this. So we have to begin to think about this much more open-mindedly. Now, it is very difficult to predict exactly. After all, sitting in 1930s, it was very difficult to have imagined exactly how the post-Depression, post-World War II was going to be.
Right.
But it went in a certain track. And let me give you, as an illustration, how things developed.
Yeah.
So much of the last 70 years, the consumer behavior, the way how we live our lives, was driven by the following phenomena. American soldiers, after the Second World War, went home. And they wanted, they had had enough of war. They wanted to get married, set up families. And so they began to get married and set up families. And it was discovered that one way to house these new families was to simply build suburbia.
Right.
So starting late 40s, early 50s, suburbia became the growing phenomenon. And as that happened, suburbia had its own logic. And that logic is what drove television, for example, washing machines, dishwashers. There was an entire lifestyle, cars, their entire lifestyle, and it fed on itself because obviously as suburbia was created, it also required a certain kind of consumerism that came from it, and products were developed as a result of that. The point I'm making is that led into a certain trajectory of behavior that ultimately spread around the world, and we have all ended up imbibing that form of consumerism.
Sure.
Now it's obvious that given this very big shock, that we may go down the same trajectory. It's quite possible we may have changed our trajectory of behavior as societies. Now, can I predict what that will be? No. So what I'm trying to say is there will be opportunities in whatever this new world is, but we should be, and I'm not just saying this is from an Indian perspective, globally, we need to think of this much more open-mindedly of how this will evolve.
So last couple of questions, Sanjeev, as you watch this, or as we all watch the new world unfold, inside our country, we've seen over the last several weeks as the lockdown was announced that thousands of people from the big cities walking back home to their villages in Bihar, UP, Rajasthan, as far as Madhya Pradesh. Now, what happens once the lockdown ends and we emerge from it?
As you already know, there are already efforts being made to ease this. It will be done systematically. Of course, transportation links have to be arranged for some of this movement.
Yeah.
It's not just migrants, there are students, there are tourists who happen to be on holiday somewhere.
Yes.
And so on. There are a lot of people stuck in a place different from their normal residence or place of work and so on. And so there will be a movement of people. The idea is to allow it to happen in a systematic, arranged, controlled way. Remember, there is also the danger that this movement may also move the virus around from current hotspots to other spots.
Sure.
So it will be done, and it needs to be done. We can't indefinitely leave people stuck in places that are not their homes. But we also need to at every point make a judgment about what the trade-offs are. So this is not that there is no set rules that you can say A, B, C, and then go through this. You have to continuously do feedback loop and adjust the policy as the best available data emerges.
So are you saying then that the trains could be started sometime soon? And I'm not even talking about flights right now.
That is not my judgment. That you will have to ask the relevant ministry. But my limited purpose here is to explain to you the overall philosophical framework we are using, which is unwind it step by step, watch what happens as you do it, and respond accordingly. But generally speaking, I think we can, as a country, be reasonably proud. It's not just the government, it's the people of India who have really partnered, and every aspect, whether it's NGOs, business, administration, we really partnered in doing something quite remarkable. And now that we begin to unwind it, let us not suddenly lose control. Let us do it step by step in an organized way so that the benefits of that period of lockdown are not suddenly squandered. But yes, we clearly need to unwind this now.
Sanjeev, thank you so much for giving us an outline of this brave new COVID world. We will continue to be watching you and what the Finance Ministry as well as what the Prime Minister announces in a few days from now. But thank you so much, and do subscribe to the Print's YouTube channel, and please read us all, and please tell your friends as well.